Nobody's coming to save you, and that's your greatest power. See, the moment you finally accept that nobody's waking you up in the morning, nobody's paying your bills, nobody's gonna do your push-ups, and nobody's coming to hold your hand when life crushes you, that's when you finally tap into the power that's been sitting inside you the whole time. You've been waiting on a sign, a friend, a family member, a savior, but the truth is, they're not showing up because they were never supposed to. This is your fight, your war, your breakthrough, and it doesn't happen until you stop waiting and start walking. See, the problem isn't that life is hard. The problem is that you still think someone's supposed to make it easy. The problem is you're still sending the lifeboat signal, hoping somebody hears it, when the reality is it's you. It's always been you. You're the one. You keep saying they don't support me. Good. Use it. Fuel up. Because when you stop looking for support, you start building your own foundation. You become concrete. Unshakable. You become that version of you that no longer flinches when life hits. That version that doesn't need applause because they're too busy breaking limits. Listen, you've got to get up every morning and say to yourself, if I don't do it, it won't get done. That's the switch. That's the power. That's the rebirth of the beast. That's when you realize you've been the problem and the solution all along. You waiting on motivation. You waiting on energy. You waiting on somebody to call and say, I believe in you. No, that's dead now. That mindset is expired. This next version of you, this 2025 version, they don't wait. They don't need, they build. They become, and you know what's crazy. You already know what needs to be done. You already know the steps, but because nobody is forcing you, you've been sitting on your destiny like it's a park bench. That dream, it's not dying because of hate, it's dying because of hesitation. You keep waiting for the perfect moment, but life don't give out invitations. It gives out windows and they close fast. You think the version of you in 2025 got there by chance. No, that version snapped. That version looked in the mirror and got sick of the excuses, sick of the waiting, sick of the pain, sick of being overlooked, and they didn't post about it, they didn't cry about it, they trained in silence. They built without witnesses, they locked in and became something nobody could have predicted, because that's what happens when you stop hoping and start creating. That's what happens when you stop asking for help and start helping yourself. And I get it, life's been unfair. You got trauma, you got setbacks, you got scars, but you also got air in your lungs. You also got time left on the clock. And the moment you stop using pain as your excuse and start using it as your reason, everything changes. The people who made it didn't have better lives, they had a better response. They stopped pointing fingers and started lifting themselves. You got a fight in you, but you've been saving it. For what? For when you think 2025 is going to ask you nicely to evolve. No, it's going to demand it, and either you rise or you rot. You say you want more good, then get louder than your doubts, get louder than your distractions. Get louder than the lies you keep telling yourself about why now's not the right time. Look, nobody's going to schedule your greatness. You schedule it, you earn it, you drag yourself toward it when everything in you wants to quit. And that's why the 2025 version of you will shock everybody, because they thought you were finished, they thought you were average, they thought that season broke you, but they didn't know you were using that silence to reload. They didn't know you were using the darkness to sharpen your vision. They didn't know the version of you that's coming doesn't care about applause, they care about results. It's on you now, not your friends. Not your circumstances, not your parents, not your partner, you, and that's power, because once it's all on you, there's no more waiting, there's no more asking, there's no more hoping, there's only doing, there's only becoming, and the scariest version of you, the most dangerous, disciplined, focused version, is the one who finally understood that no one's coming to save them, so they saved themselves. They built a routine out of pain. They turned failure into fuel. They stopped checking their phone and started checking their habits. They stopped begging for approval and started living with intention. They woke up early. They stayed up late. They weren't interested in being liked, they were interested in being legendary. That version doesn't cry when it's hard, they grind harder. That version doesn't run when it's scary, they face it. That version doesn't retreat, they reload. They're not searching for purpose in quotes and captions. They are the purpose, they are the quote. They are the proof that when you stop depending on the world and start demanding from yourself, the world starts watching in shock. Because you didn't just evolve, you exploded. You turned your silence into power, your doubt into discipline, your fear into fire, and your time into transformation. You became the one no one saw coming, because while they were scrolling, you were sculpting. While they were talking, you were training. While they were laughing, you were locking in, you've been grinding, but you still stuck. You've been waking up early, staying up late, putting in the hours, but it still feels like nothing's moving. You hitting the gym, but your heart ain't in it. You making content, but your soul ain't in it. And you wonder why you tired, why you frustrated, why you burnt out. It's because you're trying to outwork a version of you that's already 10 steps ahead, not physically, but internally. That version of you in 2025, they're healed, they're hungry, they're humble. They not just working hard, they working right. They ain't grinding out of fear, they grinding with clarity. They ain't hustling for attention, they hustling because they know who they are. You still trying to earn your worth? That version already owns it. You got the hustle, you got the skill, but you ain't dealt with the stuff in your heart that's slowing you down. You still triggered by the past. You still bitter about what they said. You still holding on to offense like it's fuel, but poison don't power champions. You can't become your future if you're still chained to your history, that healed version of you. They stopped blaming, they stopped reliving it, they faced it, they forgave anyway, they released it, not for the other person, but because they realized weight slows down warriors. You trying to sprint toward your dream with a backpack full of betrayal. That don't work. That healed version in 2025, they walk light, they move sharp, they fight clean, because they did the inner work before they ever touched the outer grind and hunger. Oh, they don't need to be pushed. They pull every day, they wake up starving, not for money, not for fame, but for growth, for mastery, for elevation. They don't need external motivation because they live in alignment. They're not driven by what they don't have. They're driven by who they refuse to stay. They look at their past, and instead of being ashamed, they use it like fire. They're not trying to prove anybody wrong. They're trying to prove their future self right. And that's why they're dangerous. That's why you can't compete with them. Because their hunger comes from a place deeper than validation. It's spiritual, it's primal, it's purpose driven. You want to be like them. Then stop needing permission and start needing purpose. Stop chasing likes and start chasing legacy. Because real hunger don't quit when it's tired, it quits when it's transformed. And let's talk about the last piece, humility. That version of you in 2025, they ain't arrogant, they don't brag, they don't flash, they don't talk about how hard they work, they let the results speak. They've been through too much to flex, they've failed too many times to fake it. They walk like giants but serve like servants. They stay teachable, they don't act like they know it all. They sit at tables ready to learn, ready to grow, ready to listen. That's why they can move rooms without making noise. That's why their presence carries weight, because the strongest version of you ain't the loudest, it's the most disciplined, the most focused, the most quietly confident. You still posting your progress because you need the world to clap. That version don't need applause, they already got peace. You trying to become a legend, but you still walking around with a wounded spirit. You trying to climb mountains, but you haven't cleaned up your mental environment. You trying to dominate, but you haven't submitted to the process that makes dominance possible. That version of you, they submitted, they let go of their ego, they stopped pretending, they got real, they cried when they had to. They sat still when they needed to. They stopped running from the healing and started chasing it like it was the only thing that mattered, because it was. That's the part nobody tells you. It's not just grind time, it's growth time. It's not just hustle, it's heart surgery. It's not just push-ups and productivity, it's pruning. You gotta cut off what's fake to let what's real grow. You want to level up, then you gotta line up your mindset. Line up your spirit, line up your discipline with your destiny, because the healed version of you don't argue with people, they outgrow them. They don't explain themselves, they execute. They don't prove points, they prove progress. You still talking about someday? That version wakes up every day like it's day one. They don't need January 1st to change. They don't need a milestone to get serious. They are the milestone. They are the standard. They are the example of what happens when you stop fighting the storm and start becoming the storm. You can try to outwork them, but it won't happen not until you deal with the wounds, ignite the hunger, and walk in humility. Because that version of you in 2025 doesn't need hype. They've built habits. They don't chase shortcuts. They chase systems. They're not addicted to the grind. They're addicted to alignment. They don't care about looking successful. They care about being whole, and when someone moves like that whole, hungry, humble, you can't stop them. Life can't break them. Distractions can't shake them. Fear can't freeze them, because they've done the work you've been avoiding. They've healed what you've been hiding. They've sharpened what you've been soft on. And now they're living proof that the next level is never found in louder hustle. It's found in deeper healing, unshakable hunger, and quiet humility that doesn't need to announce the glow up, because the glow up is too loud to ignore without a single word. Spoken motivation is a liar. It shows up when it feels good. It shows up when the weather is nice, when the sun is shining, when the likes are high, when the energy is right. But discipline don't care about your feelings. Discipline don't need an invitation. Discipline wakes up when it's cold, shows up when it's dark, pushes through when your body says no, when your mind says quit, when your soul says sleep. You keep waiting to feel like it, and that's why you're behind. That's why you keep starting over, because you're married to motivation instead of making a covenant with consistency. The ones who win long term, they ain't the most talented, they ain't the most hyped. They're just the most disciplined. Discipline will have you in the gym when nobody's clapping. Discipline will have you studying while your friends are out. Discipline will have you broke, quiet, focused, grinding in the dark, building a version of you that's going to make people question if you ever even struggled. You keep thinking it's about motivation, but motivation's a spark. Discipline is firewood. You can't keep a fire burning on sparks. You need something that sticks, something that shows up daily, something that survives your bad moods, something that don't flinch when you feel low. That's what discipline does. It ain't sexy, it ain't flashy, but it gets the job done every single time. You think those top-tier performers feel motivated every morning? No, they've just built systems. They've built patterns that don't ask how they feel, they just execute. They've trained their body to show up even when the mind ain't on board. You still negotiating with your goals. You still hitting snooze like you're rich. You still taking days off like greatness is gonna wait for you. Newsflash, it won't. Discipline is what steps in when everything in you wants to back down. Discipline is what kicks the door open when fear locks it. Discipline is what whispers keep going when motivation disappears. You can't trust motivation, it's too emotional. You gotta lean on something stronger, something rooted, something locked in. That's discipline. Discipline is the only reason the version of you in 2025 even exists. That version didn't get there by accident. They got there through reps, through sacrifice, through deciding that results mattered more than feeling. You want to see change, then stop waiting to feel inspired and start becoming intentional. You ain't going to become unrecognizable off vibes. You're going to become unrecognizable off habits, off structure. Off that boring, gritty, silent work that nobody celebrates, but that changes everything. You're not behind because you lack motivation. You're behind because you lack consistency. You show up when it's easy. You disappear when it's hard, but that 2025 version of you, they show up anyway, they show up tired, they show up confused, they show up uncertain, but they still show up. Because they understand something you don't. The days that don't feel good are the ones that matter the most. That's where your character is built. That's where the separation happens. Everybody can grind when it's hype. Everybody can move when the crowd is cheering. But who moves when it's dead silent? Who trains when the lights are off? Who studies when the camera's not rolling? Who gets back up after the 100th fall? That's discipline, and that's why 2025 belongs to them, not you until you flip the switch. You think success is about waking up motivated every morning. No, it's about dragging yourself through the mud day after day until mud becomes muscle. It's about ignoring your mood and trusting your mission. Discipline doesn't argue with your emotions, it overrules them. You're not tired, you're undisciplined. You're not uninspired, you're unfocused. And the moment you stop blaming your lack of motivation and start owning your habits, that's when the shift begins. That's when the work starts working. That's when the results start compounding. That's when the world starts whispering, who is this version of you? Discipline, don't flinch. Discipline, don't fold. Discipline, don't wait for the mood to be right. It becomes the mood, it becomes the reason, it becomes the fuel, and if you don't build it now, you'll keep restarting every year, watching people pass you by, not because they're better, but because they're more disciplined. They decided, they committed, they took motivation off the table and replaced it with discipline as a non-negotiable. You keep asking for motivation like it's magic, but discipline is the magic. It's the difference maker. It's the lifeline. It's the reason you'll win when others fold. It's the version of you that don't need to feel right. They just do what's right because they're not chasing a moment. They're building a legacy. They're not addicted to dopamine. They're addicted to discipline. And that addiction pays in results, in respect, in transformation, in that shocked look on everyone's face when they realize you didn't wait for motivation, you just kept moving. Even when it didn't make sense, even when it didn't feel fair, even when nobody was watching, even when the world was sleeping, and that's exactly when you became unstoppable. You keep telling yourself they slept on you. You keep saying they ignored you, they doubted you, they passed you over. But the truth is, you weren't ready. You weren't overlooked, you were underdeveloped. The world didn't miss you, you just hadn't matured yet, and that's a hard pill to swallow. But until you admit it, you'll keep living in this victim loop, thinking life owes you something. Nobody owes you anything. You weren't supposed to blow up back then. You weren't prepared to hold the weight. You would have fumbled it. You would have ruined it. You didn't have the mindset. You didn't have the habits. You didn't have the structure. You had the dream, but not the depth. The fire, but not the foundation. And you mad at the delay, but that delay was your development. That delay was God protecting you from the stage your character couldn't survive. You want the spotlight, but you haven't built the spine to carry it. You want recognition, but you can't even recognize your own patterns. You want millions to follow you, but you still get distracted by likes. You want success, but your attitude still folds under pressure. How you gonna lead if you can't even lead yourself? That version of you in 2025, they stopped blaming the world for not seeing them. They realized they couldn't be seen clearly until they did the inner work to clean the lens. You weren't invisible, you were incomplete, and that's okay. That's not weakness, that's awareness. That's the birthplace of power. Because once you realize it wasn't them, it was you now, you've got the key. You didn't get passed over, you got preserved, you weren't rejected, you were resurrected, you didn't fail, you were being formed, you thought you were stuck in the wilderness, but you were in training. You were building something deeper than image, you were building integrity, you were growing bones, you were stacking scars, you were learning how to survive without applause, you were figuring out how to keep walking when the lights went off. That version of you that's coming, they're solid. They don't just look strong, they are strong. They don't need validation because they've built value. They don't get shaken because they've already been shattered and still kept standing. You can't fake that. You can't shortcut that. You gotta go through the long road, the lonely road, the silent seasons, the behind. The scene seasons. Everybody wants elevation, but nobody wants excavation. You gotta dig out the old before you can lay a new foundation. And the truth is, back then, you were still filled with pride, still filled with fear, still walking with wounds you hadn't even faced. Still blaming others for your delay, still hoping for a moment instead of becoming the moment. That version of you in 2025, they had to lose a lot to win. They had to shut down distractions. They had to kill the ego. They had to learn to clap in empty rooms. They had to build a fire no one could see. And now that they're ready, everything changes. Because when preparation meets alignment, doors don't just open, walls collapse. Limits break. The world watches in shock. Because now you're not begging to be seen. You're undeniable. Now you're not chasing success. You're attracting it. Not because it's easier, but because you've done the work. You're not loud. You're locked in. You're not emotional. You're efficient. You're not insecure. You're intentional. You're not rushing. You're rooted. That's why they'll be shocked, because they thought nothing was happening. But what they didn't see was the pressure, the pruning, the pain, the process. They didn't see what was happening under the soil. They judged your potential by your silence. They didn't know you were growing roots. They didn't know you were under construction. And when you come out in 2025, you don't come out the same. You come out strategic. You come out seasoned. You come out surgical with your moves. You don't waste time. You don't chase approval. You don't explain your transformation. You let the fruit speak. You let the results scream. You don't have to defend yourself anymore. That's what underdevelopment gave you: a foundation too deep to collapse, a character too refined to crack, a mindset too sharp to get distracted by mediocrity. They didn't see you before because you weren't done cooking, but now you've mastered the oven, you've mastered the silence. You've mastered the wait, and that's why when you walk into 2025, it's not revenge, it's release. It's not ego, it's evidence that you didn't quit when you were hidden, that you didn't fold when you were forgotten. That you didn't fake it just to feel relevant. You stayed in the fire. You stayed on your grind. You stayed in development until the foundation was strong enough to carry the version of you they swore would never exist. The version of you that's coming in 2025 isn't fragile. They're not begging for likes, not begging to be included, not chasing attention. They ain't playing victim to their emotions. They've been through too much, seen too much, lost too much to still be soft. You think the storm made them weak? Nah, it made them weaponized. They learned how to sit in pain and not flinch, learned how to walk through rejection without needing explanation, learned how to bleed without crying about it. They're not scared of pressure anymore, they train in it. They live in discomfort, they choose it, because they understand one thing: comfort is a cage, and the version of you that still needs comfort can't sit at the table with greatness. That soft version of you, that's the one who needed approval, who needed everybody to believe in you before you believed in yourself, who needed the right mood, the right song, the perfect timing just to take one step. That version don't make it to 2025. That version gets left behind, because the next chapter, it's war. Not physical, not violent, but mental, spiritual, financial, emotional. And if you're still scared to be uncomfortable, scared to be judged, scared to fail publicly, you ain't ready. You don't need more motivation. You need armor. You need calloused hands and a focused mind. You need a spirit that doesn't break when the plan breaks. A mentality that doesn't fold when the pressure spikes. A routine that don't miss even when everything else in your life is falling apart. See, when they see you in 2025, they won't recognize you not because you changed your look, but because you changed your mindset. You got rid of your dependency on validation. You don't need to hear "I'm proud of you" to keep going. You are proud of you. You don't need somebody to say "you got this." You already know. You're not searching for feedback. Every step of the way, you are the standard. You show up with intention. You move with precision. You build in silence and let your discipline speak volumes. You don't take things personal. You take them serious. Every step, every rep, every hour of sleep, Every dollar spent calculated. Because when you're built for war, you don't waste anything. Not energy, not time, not breath. You know what you used to be: fragile, sensitive, easily thrown off. One bad comment and you'd stop. One bad day and you'd fold. One failure and you'd vanish. But now you don't just bounce back, you come back stronger, smarter, sharper. You learned how to take a hit and keep swinging, learned how to lose with grace and still walk like a giant. That version of you in 2025, they don't play defense, they attack. They take the pain and weaponize it. Take the silence and turn it into strategy. They've turned rejection into redirection. Turned pressure into performance. You call it suffering, they call it training. You call it sacrifice, they call it standard. People say, you've changed. Damn right. You changed on purpose. You trained for this. You chose to let the weak version of you die in the shadows. The version that needed attention, the version that wanted everything fast, easy, and painless, that person is gone. The new you don't want easy, you want earned. You don't want sympathy, you want results. You don't seek followers, you seek impact. You walk into rooms and you don't say much, but your presence speaks before your mouth does. You're not looking for handouts, you built your own table. You're not soft anymore, you're sculpted by the fire you didn't run from. And when people wonder how you got here, they won't see the late nights, the early mornings, the tears, the sweat, the years of silence. They'll just see the version of you that looks like they were born for this. But you weren't born for it, you became it through the betrayal, through the isolation, through the process nobody wanted to do. You became someone the old you wouldn't even recognize, and that's the point. That's the proof that you didn't just survive, you evolved. You rebuilt your habits, your circle, your belief system. You stopped playing small. You stopped hiding your hunger. You started owning your pain. You got sick of being average, sick of playing nice with potential. You went to war with your excuses. You slaughtered your old mindset, and now what's left? A version of you that walks with purpose, talks with discipline, moves with clarity, and fights like everything is on the line because it is. This ain't a soft season. This is a battlefield. You either train or you break. You either sharpen your mind or let life dull you down. You either show up disciplined, locked in, ready to go to war for your future, or you get swallowed by your comfort zone. That 2025 version of you ain't coming by accident. They're being forged in discomfort, built in discipline, refined in fire, and when they arrive, they don't ask for a seat, they bring their own table. They don't knock on the door, they become the door. They're not soft, they're not scared, and they're damn sure not looking for permission. They're built for war, and war is exactly what they're ready to win. You stopped posting, you stopped explaining. You stopped texting back, and they thought you gave up. They thought the silence meant you were done, that life broke you, that the pressure folded you. But what they didn't realize is you were just in the lab. In the dungeon, in the zone, while they were watching, scrolling, talking, you were building. You weren't quiet because you were weak. You were quiet because you were working. You were tired of announcing plans. You were tired of giving people access to something they didn't respect. You decided to let the work speak, let the process speak, let the results speak, because real power doesn't scream. It moves in silence and strikes with precision. You had to go ghost, had to disappear, not because you ran away, but because you were finally running toward something, toward a higher standard, toward the version of you that don't need noise to feel seen. You don't need validation anymore, you need execution. You don't need compliments, you need completion. The old you used to talk about what you were gonna do. The 2025 version of you just does it. They don't forecast dreams, they finish missions. And when people finally notice, it's not because you told them. It's because the difference was too loud to ignore. You used to be the one updating everybody. You wanted them to see your progress, your potential, your promise. You needed their belief because you hadn't fully believed in yourself. But that's done now. You stopped looking for belief and started building your own proof. You stopped reaching out and started reaching in. You built confidence through consistency. You built clarity through isolation. You built strength through stillness. Now, when you walk into rooms, you don't speak first. The energy does. The discipline does. The glow-up they thought would never happen does. That's what silence gave you, not peace and quiet, but power and proof. They thought the quiet meant you had nothing to say. But what they didn't understand is that legends don't explain. They emerge, and you were becoming the version of you that don't need to be seen to feel significant. You were learning how to build in secret, how to grind without gallery seats, how to break generational curses without breaking down for likes. That's different. That's rare. Most people need to be witnessed. You needed to be worth witnessing. You were working on you, on the trauma, on the mindset, on the routine, on the habits, on the healing, on the hunger. And while they were watching trends, you were watching time because you knew you didn't have any to waste. People think silence means surrender, but for you it meant strategy. You weren't hiding. You were studying your patterns, your triggers, your weaknesses, and while they were laughing, you were learning. While they were flexing, you were fixing. While they were coasting, you were climbing. And now the version of you that's walking into 2025, they don't even need revenge. They don't need applause. They don't even need closure, because they understand something bigger, that silence is not a weakness. Silence is a setup, it's a season, it's a signal that something is being born in the dark, and when it shows up, it don't knock. It kicks the door down and makes the whole room pause. You don't need to go viral. You don't need to trend. You need to transform. You need to become so locked in, so disciplined, so dangerously focused that by the time the world notices, it's too late. You already moved. You already leveled up. You already became what they said you couldn't. They thought your quiet was a pause, but it was a reload, a recalibration, a war drum so deep they couldn't hear it until it hit. And when it hits, it doesn't come with a warning. It comes with impact. That's the version of you that's coming. The one that doesn't get loud to be seen, they're seen because they've built something loud. You want to shock the world. Stop updating it. Stop feeding it previews. Stop trying to impress people who ain't doing what you're doing. Start starving your distractions. Start watering your discipline. Start living like the only voice that matters is the one inside you telling you to keep going. Because the world is full of noise, but very few have depth. Very few have silence strong enough to stand in it without cracking. You are not fragile. You are focused. You are not scared. You are sculpting. And when the world finally looks your way, they won't just see results, they'll feel the shift, the energy, the edge, because the truth is, you were never quiet. You were just too loud for words, too deep for surface conversations, too committed to entertain temporary approval. You've been building something eternal, something undeniable, something that don't need to be introduced. It just walks in and makes everything stop.